Edgar Ortega, Handsome Blind Guy. Today I'm going to talk about a perspective that you can roll over in your mind to help you explain perhaps why we exist. And this is part 3 in my purpose series on the purpose of life. If this sort of content interests you, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll get updates each time I upload a new video. And today I'm going to talk about something that I've touched on before, and that's a couple theodicies. These are ways of explaining our existence in the world, having been created by a God that's all good, all powerful, and yet we live in this world where we suffer. We go through difficult things. There's suffering in the world. So why is it that we're here? And if God exists, why does he allow us to suffer? And this will give us a perspective. My tripod died on me. It went off into the spirit world. And so this video will last as long as I can hold my hand up anyway and speak at the same time. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about a couple theodicies, and it'll give you kind of a different perspective that most people don't really think about if they're restricted maybe into the way they see their philosophy of how existence works, on how they view why we're here and why we suffer. Perhaps if you're an atheist, you don't believe in God because of the suffering that's in the world. That's a common argument a lot of people use. And maybe you can consider this theodicy. This is one of them. And the one I'll be talking about, maybe one or two, is the soul-making theodicy and the contrast theodicy. They kind of go hand in hand. And the idea is that we exist in the world and there's suffering, but we're put here as incomplete creations, in that God created us, but he didn't finish the job, because to become a full-on good soul that merits entrance into heaven, or to entrance into some higher plane of existence that you might call heaven, there's a process that we need to go through to complete the creation of ourselves, to complete the creation of our souls, perhaps integrating certain virtues into our being, into who we are, before we can fully appreciate the full majesty of what you might think of as heaven. Now, the contrast theodicy says that there cannot exist good without evil being right there with it, right? You can't fully understand what good is or evil is without its opposite, okay? And so the contrast theodicy says that evil exists in the world simply because good exists. You can't understand one without the other. And right along with the soul-making theodicy, we exist as incomplete creations, incomplete souls. And so our time here on earth, we can think of it this way. I'm not saying these things are true, but it's a way of thinking about it, if you like exploring these ideas. And so we are created, put on this planet in a world with suffering, with good and with evil, so that we can acquire certain virtues, and so we can fully understand and appreciate everything that is good before we enter into a realm where there's nothing but good. In other words, we can't become full creations without going through this process. And that is an important lesson in considering this existence as a training ground. And we're here to acquire these virtues. These fall pretty well in line with the philosophies that say Aristotle, that said that life is kind of a process where we, through practice, acquire these virtues. And so if you see the world as simply like life's not fair, right? You're not understanding, you don't believe in God because evil exists, there are several ways of looking at the world where God can exist as an all-powerful being. God can exist as an all-loving, omnibenevolent being, all-good being, and yet we can be in this world where there is suffering. And so often we discount these possibilities, and so it's important to think of things this way. And when we acquire these virtues, it's this process of suffering that often leads us to becoming better people, isn't it? There are people who go through difficult times, and it is that struggle, that fire that they went through, that makes them into better people, that helps them to acquire these virtues. For example, when we suffer, we could give into it. We could give up, right? We can be overwhelmed by it. Or we can become more patient. Hence, acquiring a virtue, becoming a better person because of that struggle. When we suffer, when we go through difficult times, we can become more compassionate, more kind, more empathetic, specifically to those who later on, after you overcome this difficulty or are going through it at the same time as other people, you can help other people who are going through that same thing because you understand it. Quite often we listen better to those who understand the things that we're going through, more so than we would somebody that's trying to help us but never really went through those same things, right? And so when we go through those difficult things, we can become kinder, we can become more compassionate, we can become better equipped to help relieve that suffering in the world with those that have gone through the same sort of things. And so that suffering, a process of suffering, equips us in a very real way. And we can become better people. So through suffering, we can acquire patience. Through this suffering, we can acquire kindness, empathy, and compassion. Right? These are virtues. And as this process that we go through in life, suffering, usually several times in your life, you'll go through difficult things. And at first, you may become overwhelmed by these things. And that might be part of the process. You may give up completely and just kind of shut yourself out from the rest of the world. And when you become older, suffering doesn't take a break. You're going to go through difficult times. Some people go through more suffering than others. But at some point, you become more mature, you grow, you understand that they're suffering. You don't see yourself as a victim in the world. And then you become a better person. You become better equipped to help others. And you acquire these other virtues. And you can see that soul-making process. We talked about that theodicy that we talk about in, say, theology, of understanding our existence in the world despite there being evil in the world, despite there being bad things, difficulties, struggles in life. And when you understand it that way, the struggles that you face are not a bad thing in and of themselves, but in as much as they make you a better person, if you choose to go that way. When you become wiser and you understand that. As a child doesn't understand why they have to be punished for certain things they do, why they have to go through certain suffering in the mind of a child. But when you become older, you can use it to achieve the ultimate purpose in life, and that's to become a good person so that we can go out into the world and relieve that suffering. We can suffer, but we don't want to keep suffering, right? And so we get just enough to become better people in that process of making ourselves whole into a complete soul. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but that's how it happened. I don't have a script, as you can tell from my kind of rambling sometimes. I just turn the camera on and start talking. But I hope that helps you kind of understand, or at least consider, why there's suffering in the world, and maybe give you a new perspective, a new way of looking at things, and that God can exist very much so in this world with suffering. And we may be here going through that process of becoming souls so that we can fully appreciate everything that's good, because we've been through the opposite. Right? All the good is better appreciated when you understand the other side of it. And one big question that you can ask yourself is, does it take one life to learn all the lessons needed to become a full soul? Many Western, perhaps religious people, would say, yeah, it's one and done, man. That's the only chance you get. But is it enough to learn all the lessons there are to live, to attain all of these virtues to a practical extent that you fully appreciate a world with just good in it? Or does it take several lifetimes? Do we live many lives as perhaps more Eastern faiths might teach, or philosophers, perhaps the mystics? What do you think? Do you think we live once and that's all the time we have to live everything there is, to learn all the lessons, to acquire all of the virtues that lead us to fully being able to appreciate a world where everything is good, otherwise known as heaven? Or do we not transition into that realm until we fully could appreciate it for all that it is by having experienced all the suffering and all the opposite? So, and through this way, we become good people, we become whole souls. So that's the gist of the soul-making theodicy and the contrast theodicy, kind of viewing things in that way, put it together, and you can live in a world where you can shape the world around you. You can use all the bad things that come at you, and you become stronger as a person. So use all those bad things that come at you to become better people, to become more patient, to become kinder, to become more compassionate, and help those around you, especially those who have gone through the same sort of things that you've gone through. So another way of looking at the world. I hope that makes sense. My name's Edgar Ortega, handsome blind guy. If this sort of thing interests you, again, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think in the comments. Does this stuff make sense to you? Do you think this helps explain why there's suffering in the world? If God is good, if God is all-powerful, omnibenevolent as well, all good, omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing. Let me know what you think. And what do you think of the soul-making theodicy and the contrast theodicy? Does it help you make sense of the world? Can it help you make sense of our purpose here in life? If you didn't see my other two videos on the purpose of life, the first one is on what is the purpose of life. The second one is how to discover your specific purpose in this life. And today I gave you a little bit more of a perspective on how we can view our existence here and why there's suffering in the world if God is all good and everything. Anyway, once again, my name's Edgar Ortega, handsome blind guy. I'll see you, or you'll see me, in a future video.